Right, in this one of the MayaBasics series, I'm going to look at the Extrude Tool. This is a tool that I use quite a lot in terms of modeling. So let's have a look at it. So I'm going to create a poly, just in the poly cube. I'll resize this up to 1 meter squared. Press F to focus in. And then I'm just going to grab a face on this. So Extrude Tool works on all subcomponents, so edges, faces and vertices. I mean, mainly I use it on faces and edges, but I'll show you an example on verts as well. In terms of accessing the Extrude Tool, can I get it from the Edit Mesh menu? We have Extrude. Here we go. Note that there is a shortcut for this, Control E. It is a tool I use quite a lot, so I do use that shortcut. We also have access to this in the modeling tools as well. So under here, Extrude. Okay. And obviously from our poly modeling shelf as well. So let's grab this face. Let's do a Control E. So it will extrude whatever you have selected. So unlike the other tools we looked at in the MayaBasics, the Insert Edge Loop and the Multi-Cut tool, what we're actually doing here is not cutting into an existing shape. We're bringing out geometry from the existing shape. So let's just look at the basics. So in our view menu, we can extend this out, so we can go into thickness, and we can bring out the thickness of this new set of geometry. I can also type a value in here, so if I want to bring this out by a meter, I can just type in 100. I can bring that out a certain amount. Okay. The local translate Z in this particular thing acts exactly the same, so I am actually bringing it out from this point of view. So you notice that kind of is the same there. Okay, so I'm not going to play around with that. The offset will do a uniform scale on this new face, so we can scale this in or out. And divisions is just going to start adding more geometry through this section here. Okay. Again, as with all the other tools, when we're adding geometry to a shape, you may want to leave this out and just add geometry yourself when you need it through using the multi-cut or the Insert Edge Loop tool. But it is there if you definitely know that you need those cuts through to be able to shape that geometry. Okay. So this keep faces together. I'll just give you a demonstration of that using a slightly different example. So I'll just scale this up actually quickly. So let's go into this. Let's just bring this out. So say I was creating a door, and I want some beveled panels on this. So some kind of architrave. Just going to create some cuts through the middle. I'm just using the multi-cut tool there. Control Shift and X, and just middle mouse clicking or control clicking to add the loop, and then middle mouse clicking to create these in the center. So all I'm going to do is just say select these faces here. Let's do an extrude, Control E. And I'm just going to do an offset on this. So what the offset's going to do, let's bring this in. It's going to create a sort of a border around this, a polygon border. It's actually an edge loop as well, or a set of poly loops. And we're creating this right in the center of that. So that's okay if we want to create like a glass panel in the middle of the door. But if I want to create one of these in each section of this, what I would have to do is sort of select one, do an offset there, get this value, copy this value across, click on here, do the same. So it was 15.6, I think it was. Carry on doing it this way and this way, etc., etc. So we want a more efficient way of doing that. And that is exactly what this tool does. Let me just make sure that I've taken it. Okay. Make sure that I go backwards enough to get rid of the extrude. I'll talk about that in a second. Let's Control E, do an offset. So what this keep faces together does is exactly that. If I switch this off, you notice now that it's created actually an offset, an extrusion and an offset in every one of these poly faces. So really handy. The tool stays active while I'm working on it. So if I wanted to extrude these back, if I actually just change the thickness on this, now this is pushing these back. Okay, it's not actually creating a new thickness on that. It's just pushing these back as we have them. So what you find yourself doing a lot with the Extrude tool is doing another extrude on top of this. So if I want to push these backwards now. So we can just do another Control and E to bring this a new version of this menu up, or I can click on G to repeat the last tool. Really handy shortcut. You see it zeroes out those values, and now I can do is going. So with the thickness, I could go with the offset as well, and we can start bringing the detail into that. So that's what Keep Faces Together does. I can actually, while I still have this tool up, I can take this back off, but it won't actually do anything on this because I'm now working individually on those faces. If I'd done that in the first instance, it would go back to an inset over the entire thing again. Okay, let's get rid of that. So another way to use this tool, select this face this time, do a Control E. So as well as using our menu here, we can actually do all of this through this gizmo as well. So on these we have our move axes. So I have the move, in this case this is on the X, so on the Y this is on the Z. We have scale, so I can actually click on these, and this brings up my scale tool. You see I've got my non-uniform scale in the center, and I can click on the circle around the edge, and this gives me my rotate gizmo. So what we could do is exactly the same thing I was doing over here, but using this. I can bring out the thickness by actually just dragging this out. Okay. I can click on one of the boxes to bring the scale tool, and I can scale this down. And what we can do with this as well is we can scale non-uniformly if we wanted to. So I can scale in on either axes as well. And I can still add the subdivisions through this as well. I can still do that. Or again, I could use my multi-cut or my insert edge loops on there. And then we could also click on the rotation, and if I wanted to, I could start rotating this out as well. Okay, so we have that control over this within this gizmo. You could also do this just by using your normal translates as well. So if I do an extrude, that's actually created an extrude. If I come out into the move tool, for example, we do have that new set of faces there. Now this is something to be wary about, because if I click off this and accidentally forget about it, you can end up with issues on there. Because I do actually have, and if you just notice up here, I have my poly count up. If you don't have that display, heads up display, and we have our poly count. So if I just drag a selection around here, so this should be one vertex point. Here and here, like over here, click. You can actually see up here I have one vertex. If I drag over here, notice I have two vertex points. And that's because we did do an extrusion on this. Okay, so if I accidentally leave this and click on one of these and start moving these around, we start getting this polygon underneath this. We actually have a full thickness on that. So do be careful. If you do an extrusion, so let me grab that and pull it out. You see we do actually have that extra set of faces there. It's just I hadn't pulled them out. You've got to be really careful about that when you're doing extrusions. So I did the extrusion, and notice I'm not in the extrusion tool anymore. I'm just on a normal tool, so I can just pull this out. I could scale this down however I wanted to, just with my normal tools. And I could also rotate that. Okay, so I've got a number of different ways to do pretty much the same thing. Depends how you want to work with it. Obviously, I don't have the divisions on that. I would have to cut those in manually, but that would be fine. So some different ways to work with that tool. Okay, let me just undo this. Control Z. See how far I can get back. If you are undoing, what I would generally suggest is that you undo back to before you made the selection that you extruded out, and that way you're definitely getting rid of the extrusion. If you just go back to where you have the particular sub-object selected, you might actually still have the extrusion on top of there. Do be wary about it. Let me kind of show you a fix to this. So if I do an extrude on this, Control E. Okay, again, I do have this and there, Control Z. So if you forget about this accidentally, you start doing other things, what you can do is you could go into faces, into vertices, select the verts that are making up this, and again you see that I haven't got 4 verts selected there, I have 8 because we have that double set. And then under Edit Mesh, we do have this Merge tool. So if we go into the Merge, note now, I've left it at the default threshold. These are over the top of each other, so we don't really need to mess about with the threshold. But notice now, over here I have 4 vertex points again. So I click on these, that's fine. That's fixed it. So merging those verts together can get rid of that inner face. Okay, and get rid of that problem. Another thing that we can do with the extrude is we can use other things to create the extrude as well. So if I go into the options for this, so extrude, go into the settings, I have this already clicked on, so you might have this if I reset this. Actually defaults to this. But here in the curve settings, we've got this curve, can have none, selected or generated. What I'm going to do initially is I'm just going to create a quick CV curve. Just go into, say, a top view. Create curve tools. I'm going to go into the CV curve. And I'm just going to create something very quickly. Okay, press enter to do this. Let's go back into my view here. Let's just bring this tool over. So yep, I have this option selected on. So this time I'm going to click over, I'm going to click on my face, and then I'm going to shift click on this path here, and then click apply. And what it's doing is it's actually extruding around this curve. You'll see this more if I add some subdivisions to this. So there you see we're subdividing over and we're actually following that curve round. Okay, so that can be quite handy. It's not something I use a lot, but it's in there. The functionality, if you do need it, is in the Extrude tool. You just have to go into the face options just to know that that's clicked on, and you need to be creating a separate curve as well. We can have problems with that if I start moving this object around. Well, actually, it changes the history on that. I'm going to show you another tool in the next basics where we do have an issue with that being in the history as well. Let's close this. We do have extra options as well. You may have noticed in there, we do have a twist and a taper. In the channel box, if I go into here and just go down, so we're on our poly extrude face. So this is our extrusion under here. So we do have the ability to go in and change some of these parameters. And down here, we do have a twist and a taper as well. So if I click on the twist, what I can do in this is just go in and start. So what I'm doing to change this is I'm highlighting the option, keeping control pressed down and middle mouse dragging in the viewport to actually change these values. So I can twist this, and I can also taper this as well, and we can create different looks to our model. And you can do that with a straight extrusion tool as well. The main thing is you need enough subdivisions to be able to allow it to twist or taper in. Okay. Let's delete my curve. There. So, we can extrude a cylinder. Let's create a box. We can extrude verts. Let's go into vertices. Grab this. Let's do a Control E. You do have limited functionality on this. So for each of the faces that are shared by the vertex, so in this case these three here, we do have a width, which is changing the edge width on these faces. And I do have a length on there, which is actually changing the extrusion in and out of this. Okay, and at 0, there's nothing at all. And then we have divisions on there as well. So if I up the subdivisions, I can bring this out. Okay. So if you just want to get rid of a corner or something, we can use that method. Okay, we can bring that out. Similarly, I can get rid of this completely if I wanted to delete these faces and then recap this as well. This is creating n-gons here. So if I did want to fix that, what I can do is go in with my multi-cut tool, Control-Shift-X. Click from one corner. I'm going to click on, just press Shift down while I'm clicking into here, which is just going to create a cut through the middle of this edge. Press Enter. Go on here, Shift down, press Enter. Go here, Shift down, press Enter. And that way, what we're doing is we're creating n-gons round, quads round here rather, and we're also creating quads here as well. You can see that's now a quad. Okay, so you can get rid of those n-gons quite easily. The last thing is to actually look at extruding edges out. So the way I mostly use this, let's make a plane. I'm just going to get rid of these. Is if I'm doing something like strip modeling, where I will be getting edges and just extruding, and we can drag these out and then just manipulate these. I can scale these, I can click on rotate, I can rotate them around as well. So we can do that way as well. So we're creating geometry quite quickly. And a better way to actually do this is using the keyboard shortcut. So if I go over this edge and press down Shift, we have our extrude function. So I can go through, shift drag on an edge, drag it out, and then I can just use my normal rotation, scale, manipulate vertices tools. We can really quickly create geometry out of this. So it's a very fast way of creating certain types of geometry. So this is really useful for doing things like vehicles, human characters, or any type of character really. Can be a useful approach for more organic models. And that's generally how I do that. So that's just shift dragging out the edges. We can also do that with edges on a 3D object, but I wouldn't recommend it. So say I wanted to create a lid for this. I grab this and shift drag out. I wouldn't do that because this isn't a true 3D object. This is just a 2D object right now. We have no 3D depth to that. If I was doing something like that, what I would still do is let's do a multi-cut. I'll create a section like this, and then as you see, I can use this shift drag with polygons as well. So I've got polygon selected, I can shift drag out, and I would do it that way. Okay, and then if needs be, I could do scale this in and shift drag that down, and then we can create like a box. But that's all quads, all 3D objects, so we've got no 2D planes on there. So something like that. Okay. Just click on my wireframe unshaded, just so I can see all that detail on there. Useful thing to have on when modeling. And that's pretty much it for edges. So just looking at extruding edges in terms of faces, extruding faces, extruding edges, extruding vertex points, and some of the tools, some of the options we can use with that tool. And that's our extrusion tool.